Water level was down, but the total weights were up for the world's best anglers. Today, Larry Nixon joins us for a recap of the exciting events on the water, which include a young angler's dream come true and a legendary angler's latest entry in a Hall of Fame career. You won't want to miss Larry's conversation with Rick Clunn and all the action from Lake Murray, starting right now on FLW Outdoors. And welcome to another edition of FLW Outdoors. I'm Carlton Wing with Larry Nixon and Taylor Carr. Today we're joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, the site of the third stop of the 2003 season on the Walmart FLW Tour.
And we said when the season started we might have Larry talking to himself in one of these shows. Well, you made the top 10 and you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Taylor. I did pretty fair out there.
But I could tell, though, you weren't satisfied with just the top 10. You really wanted to win yesterday, and you were disappointed.
It always makes me very angry when I've got a chance to win and I don't do it. And the fish kind of did their deal yesterday and left me.
We thought heading into this tournament that the main storyline was going to be the fact that the water level was down so much lower than normal, as much as 15 feet. But instead, it was the weather pattern that made the difference in the fishing.
The weather definitely changed everything. We had a south wind for a couple days, and then the last 2 days of competition, the north wind came in the rain, and it blowed all the warm water out of my area for sure, and it just made things very difficult. In fact, yesterday was probably the worst day I've ever experienced as a tournament competitor.
Well, the weather we thought was going to go up in temperature. We thought we might see some spawning towards the end of this tournament. Instead, it went the opposite direction. It zigged when we thought it was going to zag.
It really did. I'll tell you, that cold rain and them cold nights, it really changed things around, made it pretty miserable.
Larry's going to talk to three anglers in this event, guys who did very well. Chris Elliott, who won, John Cruz, who finished third, and a guy's been fishing about as long as you have, Rick Clunn.
Rick Clunn, you know, he's a great fisherman, and he had a tremendous tournament here. John Cruz, one of his highest finishes on the FLW Tour, and Chris Elliott, 27-year-old baby, goes out there and just kicks us.
We've got a lot to look forward to on this edition of FLW Outdoors. When we come back, we'll recap all of the exciting action from here on Lake Murray.
Nixon's catch early on day one was a sign of big things to come on Lake Murray. Nixon was one of 85 anglers who caught limits, and 13 of those were over 20 pounds, led by Oklahoma's Darrell Robertson.
These five fish weigh in at 26 pounds, 13 ounces, 26-13.
Robertson's stringer came on a crankbait, like many of the top catches.
Lake Murray, day two.
The weather turned nasty on day two, but it didn't slow Robertson. He caught another huge sack and led all qualifiers with an FLW record 49.5 pounds.
Lake Murray, day three.
Longtime veteran Larry Nixon has fished in plenty of tournaments over the course of his career, but the Chevy Pro may have a hard time remembering a better start to a tournament day than day three. On his 10th cast, Larry landed a big one, a 7-pounder.
I want you to get him as soon as I get him in there. Get him! Good girl! Woo! What a start! Man! Check that sucker out.
Within the next hour, Nixon would add a 5 and a 3.5 pounder to give him 15.5 pounds by 9:15. That was the good news for Nixon. The bad news was that he boated just over 6 pounds over the next day and a half and finished 6th. Bud Pruitt got a confidence boost Friday morning. This 7-pounder was part of a 20-pound final round that landed the Texas Pro in 6th place.
Big boy. Yuck.
This is Chris Elliott, who is not only battling the waves, but had been battling what to do with his career. Before this tournament, Chris and his wife had decided that it was time to end his pro career and settle down to a more traditional job. He had resumes ready to deliver after this final tournament at Lake Murray, or so he thought. Elliott found himself in the top 10, guaranteeing his largest paycheck yet, which would mean perhaps one more tournament. On Friday, high winds nearly blew away his chances at a win, but Elliott made an adjustment to a new area, and fate wasn't yet ready to give up on the 27-year-old pro. That new spot produced over 30 pounds and gave him high hopes about winning it all.
Thank you, baby. Woo! This is a 4-pounder.
Lake Murray, day 4.
The final day brought rain and lots of it. 2 anglers faced the elements, literally. A bit later on FLW Outdoors, we'll hear from John Cruz and Rick Clunn about their up-close adventures on and in the water. At day's end, the Soggy Anglers returned to the weigh-in stage where the battle for first place came down to 2 anglers. Chris Elliott only caught 3 fish, but one was a 7-pounder. Stanley Mitchell had 4 and trailed by nearly 1.5 pounds.
Let's take a look now. Stanley Mitchell is unable to bring up 1 pound and 7 ounces. We have a champion, Chris Elliott, your champion here on Lake Murray. $100,000. Now, Chris, just a moment ago, you said if I win this thing, you're going to see a guy run around this stage.
I'm going to tell you, I'll do anything I have to do to win it. It's been a dream of mine, like I said, like I was 12 or 13 years old, and I just can't believe it happened.
Start believing. Chris Elliott won by almost 1.5 pounds. Just over 2 pounds separated Stanley Mitchell from John Cruz. Rick Clunn and Jody Cordell rounded out the top 5. Chevy Pro Larry Nixon took 6th, followed by Bud Pruitt in 7th, and the new Angler of the Year points leader, Dan Moorhead, in 8th. Castrol Pro Darrell Robertson and Fuji Pro Wesley Strader complete our list of the 10 finalists from Lake Murray. Here's a look at the tournament through the numbers of the Stanley stats. Darrell Robertson set a new record with a qualifying weight of 49.5 pounds. Rick Clunn now has 17 top 10 finishes in his career. He now leads that category. Stanley Mitchell's 28 pounds and 1 ounce stringer on day 2 is the 3rd highest in FLW history, and helped him come back from 126th on day 1 to make the top 10 on day 2, earning the Energizer Keeps On Going award. Darrell Robertson took the Shop Vac Clean Sweep award, going to the angler who had the highest total weight for the first 3 days. The Castrol Pro had 64 pounds, 5 ounces. But the biggest award of the day came for Chris and Rhonda Elliott. The couple who had decided this tournament had to be their last now have a new lease on professional fishing thanks to the $100,000 payday. One day we may all look back at this tournament as the turning point of a great career for Chris Elliott. FLW Outdoors is brought to you by Walmart. Always low prices, always. By Stanley. Chris Elliott nearly gave up on a pro fishing career. This tournament was going to be his last. But fate and some awfully large fish blocked his breakaway.
This is a 4-pounder.
He's now $100,000 richer. Wherever he goes, he'll always be known as an FLW champion.
I'm Larry Nixon, and with me today I've got a special guest here. His name's Chris Elliott, and he just won the FLW event on Lake Murray. And Chris, a fabulous job. And one thing I've got to ask you, how old are you?
I'm 27, Larry.
27 years old. You know, when I was 27 when I fished my first tournament. That's amazing. You're just a puppy.
Well, I don't feel like a puppy after we have to fish in the kind of conditions we've had over the past 4 days.
Hardly ideal crankbait conditions here on beautiful Lake Murray. Feel like I'm on Lake Erie. Goodness. Plan B's starting to look better and better, boys.
Where I caught all these fish on the crankbait was very vulnerable to the northeast 20-mile-an-hour wind we had. And I'm going to tell you, Larry, I showed up there the first day, Friday, of the top 10, and there were 3-foot muddy rollers crashing on the stumps I wanted to fish. And I thought, you know, we just got to survive. I got over there and, you know, I couldn't even keep the trolling motor in the water. And here I am trying to fish a stump, you know, a foot or 2 deep. And there's a 2 or 3-foot swell cracking on it. And I said, you know, this is a bad situation.
Fish don't even like that.
Plus, my cameraman said he was starting to get seasick, so we had to get out of there. We went over to this milfoil bed. This lake is full of hydrilla, and I found the prettiest, bright, neon green milfoil bed that's ever been in about 3 to 4 feet of water.
Chris, let's take a look at what's happening on the lake here.
Okay. I had that 16 pounds the first day, and I actually caught all those fish, Larry. In one pass, I caught my 5, and my partner caught 2 in our first pass through that milfoil. And I thought, my goodness, there's more fish in here than I thought. And then I think you experienced some of the same thing. I had 1 bite the rest of the day. And it was just, sometimes you scratch your head and wonder what's going on. And right here, I was pulling my hair out. I really was. I had no idea. It's nothing more frustrating than when you know you're around them and you can't get them to bite. That's the worst feeling.
Now, the second day, of course, yesterday when it poured down rain all day, did you catch your fish again, basically in this same area?
I caught, weighed in 8 fish the last 2 days, and every one came within a 100-yard stretch of each other. Sure.
That's a good school of fish. And you got to have your baits available that, you know, work for you for this tournament. And one day it may be one, and the next day it may be something else.
Yep, and that's really exactly how it worked out for me. 2 days it was one bait, and the second 2 days it was another bait. And I'm glad I switched up, and it worked out good. But this is a Bandit, a Series 100 Fire Tiger bait. It's just a shallow running crankbait. And a
little square bill.
The little square bill, you know, square bill crankbaits are hot these days. You heard Rick talking about them.
I notice you've got kind of a little different hook on the tail of that bait there. In fact, you've got what I call what is it, an EWG?
Yeah, it's an EWG.
It's
an extra wide gap hook. Yeah, it's actually a Kale treble that Eagle Claw makes.
Right.
Yeah, and it works out good. Sometimes when a fish is slapping at a bait, like on a jerk bait, it's not really. You can see how the hook kind of is turned in back towards the shank. And on a jerkbait or something, it's not so good. But if a fish comes up and will grab this bait,
he's caught.
He's going to break the line, or he's coming in the bait.
That's right. Them hooks, when they get hooked on them, buddy, they got them.
Rain's never hurt a spinnerbait bite, so I'm going to just be optimistic and say it's going to help it.
Now, the third and fourth day of competition, when your crankbait area just got wiped out, you know, the bait that actually produced the winning fish for you was definitely a spinnerbait.
Both days it seemed like early in the day I could get a little bit better bite on this double willow, and I'd kind of switch over to the Colorado a little bit later in the day. You know, it probably was just the bait I was throwing at the time. The fish were there, and they were in such a shallow strike zone. I think it was just more of a mind game I was playing than anything else.
Well, a double willow to me gives the impression of being a bigger bait fish, and when you go to Colorados, you get more of a vibration.
That's right.
And that's how I usually determine which I'm going to throw. Is I usually want more vibration for stained water, and if they can see with any degree of visibility, I like double willows.
You know, you never know what's going to happen. That's what's so neat about it. You know, I maybe could catch 3 or 4 fish today and win, or I might need 25 pounds to win. It's just come out here and fish as hard as you can and just let what happen happen.
Well, you did a fabulous job. I'm really proud of you. Congratulations on your first FLW win, and I'm sure that I'm going to be talking to you again.
Thanks a lot.
When we come back, a history-making day at Lake Murray.
Snicker's good.
Whoa, look at here. We're raising a few eyebrows, but nobody out there getting too excited.
Here, Reed, look. Reed, look. Look at that one, Reed. Look. I'm scared too. Are you getting water on you?
Yeah. Welcome back to FLW Outdoors. Earlier, we talked about the history made at this event. Daryl Robertson caught 49.5 pounds. That's the largest qualifying weight ever on the FLW Tour, but we had more history here at Lake Murray.
This tour's been around for a long time, but never before have 2 female co-anglers made the finals. It happened this week with Laura Aldridge and Pam Wood.
We got 2 fish here that weigh 9 pounds even, 22 pounds, 12 ounces. She is in 5th place. Let's see what she's got today. Pam Wood, 3 fish in the bag, and their weight 13 pounds, 12 ounces, 27 pounds, 1 ounce, a new tournament leader, Pam Wood.
Pam Wood and Laura Aldridge didn't just back into the co-angler finals. Aldridge had a 5-fish limit on day 1 and 9 pounds on day 2, and Wood had stringers of 13.5 and 13.12 to lead all qualifiers. On the FLW Tour, making the finals is a big deal. Next to winning, it's how anglers mark their success. Aldridge and Wood are paired with two of the best anglers in the business. For Wood, the easygoing Darrell Robertson. For an already anxious Aldridge, it means fishing with one of her heroes, Larry Nixon.
Ready?
No.
No?
No, let's have coffee and breakfast.
Boy, I'd love a giant breakfast and go back to bed and rest. All you gotta do is just be natural and you're in good shape.
Okay.
Both would have their hands full in a matter of minutes. Aldridge, when the first fish Nixon hooks, is a 7-pounder.
Come
Tell
here,
me
big
Tell me
sucker.
exactly what you want me to do.
I want you to get him as soon as I get him in there. Get him! Good
Oh
girl!
my gosh. Woo!
What a start!
And Wood, in less dramatic.
Water level was down, but the total weights were up for the world's best anglers. Today, Larry Nixon joins us for a recap of the exciting events on the water, which include a young angler's dream come true and a legendary angler's latest entry in a Hall of Fame career. You won't want to miss Larry's conversation with Rick Clunn and all the action from Lake Murray, starting right now on FLW Outdoors. And welcome to another edition of FLW Outdoors. I'm Carlton Wing with Larry Nixon and Taylor Carr. Today we're joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, the site of the third stop of the 2003 season on the Walmart FLW Tour.
And we said when the season started we might have Larry talking to himself in one of these shows. Well, you made the top 10 and you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Taylor. I did pretty fair out there.
But I could tell, though, you weren't satisfied with just the top 10. You really wanted to win yesterday, and you were disappointed.
Water level was down, but the total weights were up for the world's best anglers. Today, Larry Nixon joins us for a recap of the exciting events on the water, which include a young angler's dream come true and a legendary angler's latest entry in a Hall of Fame career. You won't want to miss Larry's conversation with Rick Clunn and all the action from Lake Murray, starting right now on FLW Outdoors. And welcome to another edition of FLW Outdoors. I'm Carlton Wing with Larry Nixon and Taylor Carr. Today we're joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, the site of the third stop of the 2003 season on the Walmart FLW Tour.
And we said when the season started we might have Larry talking to himself in one of these shows. Well, you made the top 10 and you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Taylor. I did pretty fair out there.
But I could tell, though, you weren't satisfied with just the top 10. You really wanted to win yesterday, and you were disappointed.
It always makes me very angry when I've got a chance to win and I don't do it. And the fish kind of did their deal yesterday and left me.
We thought heading into this tournament that the main storyline was going to be the fact that the water level was down so much lower than normal, as much as 15 feet. But instead, it was the weather pattern that made the difference in the fishing.
The weather definitely changed everything. We had a south wind for a couple days, and then the last 2 days of competition, the north wind came in the rain, and it blowed all the warm water out of my area for sure, and it just made things very difficult. In fact, yesterday was probably the worst day I've ever experienced as a tournament competitor.
Well, the weather we thought was going to go up in temperature. We thought we might see some spawning towards the end of this tournament. Instead, it went the opposite direction. It zigged when we thought it was going to zag.
It really did. I'll tell you, that cold rain and them cold nights, it really changed things around, made it pretty miserable.
Larry's going to talk to three anglers in this event, guys who did very well. Chris Elliott, who won, John Cruz, who finished third, and a guy's been fishing about as long as you have, Rick Clunn.
Rick Clunn, you know, he's a great fisherman, and he had a tremendous tournament here. John Cruz, one of his highest finishes on the FLW Tour, and Chris Elliott, 27-year-old baby, goes out there and just kicks us.
We've got a lot to look forward to on this edition of FLW Outdoors. When we come back, we'll recap all of the exciting action from here on Lake Murray.
Day 1.
Larry Nixon's catch early on day one.
Professional sport that you will see a woman win the world championship.
Coming up on FLW Out.
Water level was down, but the total weights were up for the world's best anglers. Today, Larry Nixon joins us for a recap of the exciting events on the water, which include a young angler's dream come true and a legendary angler's latest entry in a Hall of Fame career. You won't want to miss Larry's conversation with Rick Clunn and all the action from Lake Murray, starting right now on FLW Outdoors. And welcome to another edition of FLW Outdoors. I'm Carlton Wing with Larry Nixon and Taylor Carr. Today we're joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, the site of the third stop of the 2003 season on the Walmart FLW Tour.
And we said when the season started we might have Larry talking to himself in one of these shows. Well, you made the top 10 and you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Taylor. I did pretty fair out there.
But I could tell, though, you weren't satisfied with just the top 10. You really wanted to win yesterday, and you were disappointed.
It always makes me very angry when I've got a chance to win and I don't do it. And the fish kind of did their deal yesterday and left me.
We thought heading into this tournament that the main storyline was going to be the fact that the water level was down so much lower than normal, as much as 15 feet. But instead, it was the weather pattern that made the difference in the fishing.
The weather definitely changed everything. We had a south wind for a couple days, and then the last 2 days of competition, the north wind came in the rain, and it blowed all the warm water out of my area for sure, and it just made things very difficult. In fact, yesterday was probably the worst day I've ever experienced as a tournament competitor.
Well, the weather we thought was going to go up in temperature. We thought we might see some spawning towards the end of this tournament. Instead, it went the opposite direction. It zigged when we thought it was going to zag.
It really did. I'll tell you, that cold rain and them cold nights, it really changed things around, made it pretty miserable.
Water level was down, but the total weights were up for the world's best anglers. Today, Larry Nixon joins us for a recap of the exciting events on the water, which include a young angler's dream come true and a legendary angler's latest entry in a Hall of Fame career. You won't want to miss Larry's conversation with Rick Clunn and all the action from Lake Murray, starting right now on FLW Outdoors. And welcome to another edition of FLW Outdoors. I'm Carlton Wing with Larry Nixon and Taylor Carr. Today we're joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, the site of the third stop of the 2003 season on the Walmart FLW Tour.
And we said when the season started we might have Larry talking to himself in one of these shows. Well, you made the top 10 and you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Taylor. I did pretty fair out there.
But I could tell, though, you weren't satisfied with just the top 10. You really wanted to win yesterday and you were disappointed.
It always makes me very angry when I've got a chance to win and I don't do it. And the fish kind of did their deal yesterday and left me.
We thought heading into this tournament that the main storyline was going to be the fact that the water level was down so much lower than normal, as much as 15 feet. But instead, it was the weather pattern that made the difference in the fishing.
The weather definitely changed everything. We had a south wind for a couple days, and then the last 2 days of competition, the north wind came in the rain, and it blowed all the warm water out of my area for sure, and it just made things very difficult. In fact, yesterday was probably the worst day I've ever experienced as a tournament competitor.
Well, the weather we thought was going to go up in temperature. We thought we might see some spawning towards the end of this tournament. Instead, it went the opposite direction. It zigged when we thought it was going to zag.
It really did. I'll tell you, that cold rain and them cold nights, it really changed things around, made it pretty miserable.
Larry's going to talk to three anglers in this event, guys who did very well. Chris Elliott, who won, John Cruz, who finished third, and a guy's been fishing about as long as you have, Rick Clunn.
Rick Clunn, you know, he's a great fisherman, and he had a tremendous tournament here. John Cruz, one of his highest finishes on the FLW Tour, and Chris Elliott, 27-year-old baby, goes out there and just kicks us.
We've got a lot to look forward to on this edition of FLW Outdoors. When we come back, we'll recap all of the exciting action from here on Lake Murray.
When we come back, we're going to do a special piece on Texas rigging a plastic worm.
Welcome back to FLW Outdoors. We're outside Columbia, South Carolina at Lake Murray, the third stop on this year's FLW Tour.
Let's talk a little bit about our 2002 Land O'Lakes Angler of the Year, Jay Ellis. He attributes a lot of his success to light line fishing, and he uses a Texas rig a lot. So let's open up our class now in Fishing 101 and have Jay Ellis as our professor teaching the tips on a Texas rig.
If you're fishing around shallow, visible cover, the Texas rig is the way to go. I like to start with about a 3/16 ounce bullet weight, and I like to use a painted weight. I think it looks more natural than just a regular lead-colored sinker. What I'll do is I'll take my little Berkeley power worm and I'll rig it Texas style. Start at the top of the worm, come down about 1/8 of an inch, run the hook through, twist the hook, and come back just like that. You want to make sure again that the worm is hanging straight on the hook, and you're good to go. There's a couple main presentations for plastic worm fishing, and one of those is the vertical presentation. Now, a vertical presentation for a worm takes place in two different scenarios. One is in really deep water, like from 25 to 60 feet deep, and the other is in shallow, heavy cover. But when I'm fishing in deep water, I like to keep a close eye on my Eagle electronics, locate fish under the boat, and then I'll just drop that worm straight down underneath the trolling motor, and I'll just kind of shake the rod tip. And this works good for drop shotting, or it works good for Texas rigging. Either way, if there's a lot of cover down there deep, you're better off using a Texas rig so you don't hang up all the time. Now, the other type of vertical presentation is in shallow, heavy cover, like around lily pads or boat docks or fallen trees or brush piles. Say, for example, you're going to fish a brush pile, and the best way to get that fish to bite that's living right inside the heart of that brush pile is to drop that worm right in the middle of the brush pile so that the line is draped over the limbs. Shake the rod tip and give that worm a little action right in that brush pile, and a lot of times that'll trigger the strike from a bass that's living in that brush pile. So those are two different ways to present a worm vertically, in deep water or in shallow, heavy cover. The other presentation for a Texas rig worm is a horizontal presentation. That's a presentation that's used around deep vegetation or just simply on a rocky point that doesn't have a lot of cover. A horizontal presentation is very simple. It's casting the worm out, letting it sink to the bottom, and then slowly hopping it and crawling it back to the boat, up and over the cover that's on the bottom. Texas rigs work well with worms, lizards, tubes, creature baits, grubs, you name it. Any type of plastic lure can be fished on a Texas rig. It's probably the most versatile lure that there is. You can throw this rig in just about any kind of cover that they're imaginable and not get hung up. It works in clear water, it works in dingy water, sunny days, cloudy days, from Canada to Mexico, all through the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast. Probably caught more bass than anything. So there's my Texas rig, one of my all-time favorites.
Coming up next on FLW Outdoors, a conversation you won't want to miss. Larry Nixon talking to Rick Clunn.
FLW Outdoors is brought to you by...
Rick Clunn is one of bass fishing's legends. Qualifying for his 17th FLW Top 10, Clunn is now the all-time leader in that category. At Murray, he braved the elements for a 4th place finish.
Welcome back to FLW Outdoors. With me now, I've got a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Ricky Clunn, and he had a fabulous tournament, a 4th place finish here at Lake Murray. And Rick, these fish were changing a little bit every day because of the weather, and I know you applied 2 or 3 different things to catch your fish during this competition. And would you tell me just a little bit about the type of water you was fishing, whether it's back in the creek or on the main lakes? Or
Yeah, I think the beauty of this tournament, you realized it and I realized it, was essentially this tournament pretty much neutralized all the local help and stuff. We were essentially fishing a brand new lake, being 12 foot low. This lake was brand new to everybody. Even Davey Height mentioned that, who's lived here his whole life. He said he's never seen the lake this low. And when that happens, essentially you're fishing a pure body of water now. And so really that's fun. I love fishing a body of water that's essentially, pure, that it's not been polluted by a lot of fishing ideals. So I really stayed in off-color water for that reason, and also to get away from the pressure.
I mean, this is a great day for the final day. I mean, I pray for days like this for the finals, because finals are always on Saturday, and that's when you get your most traffic unless you get weather like this.
Pattern that developed for me, it developed about noon the first day. I practiced 3 days. About noon the first day of practice was the murkiest water, the muddiest water, literally, because I could only see a bait about an inch deep, 2 inches at the most, was producing the biggest fish. And the sides of the points leading to where they're eventually going to spawn was really the key. And if I could find a target, like a stump or a piece of wood or something, or eventually a chunk rock.
Right.
Anything that, if you look at these clear banks that broke the bank up.
I'd say half of my fish throughout this practice and the tournament have been in between, not on a wood or stump. That's when I really got optimistic about this pattern in practice, because if they're only on the stumps, then everybody's going to beat them to death, and you can't go behind people and catch them. But if they're in between as well, then you can follow other boats.
But even more key than that was that nothing was deeper than 2 foot. No strike came. And if you had stumps one on the bank, one sitting in a foot, and 2 out here sitting in 3 and 4 foot, the tendency of a fisherman is to fish the one closest to him and think but they weren't. They were they were really on the 1 foot stuff more than anything else.
You caught most of your fish on a crankbait and a spinnerbait this week?
My pattern, once it unfolded during the tournament, turned out to be 3 different baits. I was throwing an Orion, which is a hard plastic. I call it my woody woodpecker bait, because under the water it sounds like this giant pileated woodpecker knocking on wood. I mean, they're so loud. But in the muddy water, sometimes I like a loud bait for the fish to be able to find it.
Most definitely.
And so I used it in the real muddy water. And then the balsa, the Thunder Shad 2, I actually, once the water started clearing, or if I got in a little bit clearer water, I used it. And as the water cleared in the week, that became my primary bait, because I really was losing my muddy water. The spinnerbait produced key fish for me, but I only threw it when I got around 2 things. When I came to a brush pile, and the other place I fished spinnerbaits when I came back down in the afternoons around some of the grass.
Now this balsa bait, tell me something about balsa. What does it do that you like better than plastic?
Most lures we throw, especially crankbaits nowadays, are very loud. They've got some type of rattle system in them, of varying degrees of sound. So the number 1 reason I like balsa is quiet. It's a quiet, more subtle presentation. So if I'm fishing areas that get a lot of pressure, then I tend to like to throw a quieter bait.
One thing I like about that hook size there is I'm not afraid to set the hook on a fish with heavy line, and I'm sure you were throwing heavy line.
I was throwing primarily 17 pounds.
17. Well, when you're fishing shallow, big line usually helps keep your bait up, and not only that, gives you a lot of confidence when you get a big fish on in that shallow water to horse him out of there.
They ought to pull you out of the boat when you get it caught in a rope.
I don't know whether we've got any video of that or not, but there was a little experience took place in this tournament. Ricky got his crankbait, one that he really wanted to use in the tournament. He got it hung in a rope, and he was leaning over to get it undone. The boat was kind of moving a little bit, and the hook got in his finger, and I think you left the boat with the lure instead of staying with the boat.
Yeah, there I am right here.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, yeah, actually the boat had too much momentum, and I underestimated that. When I grabbed the line, I grabbed it, and actually it was very slick, and I slid right back into the lure, and the boat was still moving that way. And it literally drug me over the sides. You can see me right here. My head's partially under. And I'm trying to get the hook out of my hand, because I didn't know if it's buried all the way in. Fortunately, it wasn't, and I finally got it loose and turned around and got back in.
I don't know how you fished all that.
It wasn't very graceful at all.
I don't know how you fished all day like that because I was so cold I couldn't hardly cast at times, and if I'd have fell in, I'd have been over. When we come back, we'll have more from FLW Outdoors. Rick, while we look at this video, I want you to kind of clue me and the viewers in on what kind of water you were fishing and why you selected these areas.
Basically, I'm throwing the little thundershed too, and probably looking at that, I'm fishing some chunk rock in the morning. Yeah, that's what I was doing. There's a little chunk rock point there ahead of me. Again, the key was to keeping the bait in less than 2 foot of water. I actually was holding my rod real high, which is unusual for a crankbait. Right. Usually you hold your rod real low to get depth, and I'm actually holding it high to keep the bait up with the heavy line. Again, muddy water compresses the fish for you. It makes it easier to find them. Clear water, they expand. Muddy water compresses. So, I mean, it's just a very simple deal. But up here, they're in 1 to 2 foot of water. Down there, they're in 1 to 10. But I like that. I like the stuff that, you know, provokes you to think. I think the worst thing you can do as an angler is to quit thinking.
That's right. Fishing is a thinking man's game.
I've always said that probably of all sports, this sport takes more intelligence than any sport I've ever.
I feel that way.
Well, there's more variables. I mean, the most intelligent athlete in the world is an angler, because we have controlled variables, but we have many uncontrolled variables. Like you said, the time frames that we have to fish every day, the weather conditions are changing constantly, the transition of the fish are changing constantly. And what even makes you have to be even smarter is we can't see our target. A golfer can see the hole.
That's right.
Blindfold that golfer and see how good he is. But still, I'm saying, and I truly believe this, and I played all sports as when I was growing up. My dad made me. I didn't want to, but I played every sport, and it takes more intelligence in this game than any game I've ever played.
It's always been one that, you know, it changes so much and so drastically, and you've got to control your emotions so that you don't go off on a tangent, and I've always called it you're going brain dead, you know, and just going through the motions. When your fish move on you, sometimes that's a tendency of the fisherman is to stay with this same game plan, and some days that don't work out. You've got to change or adapt, and by fishing muddy water this week, you've controlled your environment a lot.
Yes, I did. You know, coming into this tournament, I've got one kind of, it's a kind of a point. It's called 2 roads diverge in a wood, and I chose the one less traveled, and it made all the difference. And you and I both know in life that is true. You and I definitely early on in our career, we chose a different road than most people for our life. And it certainly has made all the difference to you and I. But even in the tournament, before the tournament starts, I remind myself that, because just like last year, most people came down here wanting to choose the same road that we were on last year. And there are all these fish spawning all over the banks.
Right.
And it's very rare can you do well in any event if you do the same thing everybody else is doing. And so, you know, then that's why I chose the muddy water, because I really knew that everybody else was going to be trying to key on that, on the past.
Well, I've known Ricky Clunn for a long time, and he's a tremendous shallow water fisherman, one of the best crankbait fishermen I've ever known. And not only that, he's good with a spinnerbait, and he won a tournament on a worm. And that's a great tournament, Ricky, 4th place. You didn't win, but I'm going to tell you what, 4th place is good. You did a magnificent job of staying on these fish, and I want to congratulate you.
Thank you, Larry.
When we come back, we'll have more from FLW Outdoors.
FLW Outdoors is brought to you by Minn Kota, anywhere, anytime. By Kellogg's, the best to you each morning. And by EverStart Batteries, more power for your money.
Welcome back to Walmart FLW Outdoors from Lake Murray in South Carolina. A tremendous event with lots of great fish caught.
Well, each week on FLW Outdoors, we give you, the viewer, an opportunity to ask our pros a question regarding your fishing. This week's question comes from Sacramento, California. Brad Collins writes, how do you narrow down the lures you'll use during a tournament? I find I spend too much time deciding what I'm going to throw next. Well, Brad, here's your answer from Ranger Pro Rob Kilby.
Brad, that's what practice is all about, is to find out which 5 or 6 lures you're going to use during a tournament. As the tournament progresses, you go from top waters early in the morning to maybe to a spinnerbait or crankbait on up in the midday, and then maybe move into plastic worms or jigs in the afternoon. But all that's dictated by weather. I try to let the weather dictate the type of lures I throw, and if nothing else works, I always get a spinnerbait. It never lets me down.
Here's our Land O'Lakes leaderboard, and Dan Moorhead's top 10 finish puts him in the lead, followed by David Dudley, Tommy Biffle, Daryl Robertson, and Clark Wendley.
Andy Morgan is in 6th position, followed by our own Larry Nixon in 7th place, Paul Elias, Mickey Bruce, and Gary Klein. Let's take a look at the season schedule now. We're 3 events in. We have 3 regular season events to go. Next month, we'll be in Beaver Lake for the Walmart Open, followed by Kentucky Lake in May, and then we'll wrap up our regular season in June at Lake Wheeler.
And then our season ends in September, the road to Richmond on the James River, the FLW Championship in Richmond, Virginia. Carlton, our viewers really love our Fuji Find Picks segment. You're documenting the places we go and the great people we meet.
It's a lot of fun to get a behind-the-scenes look at the FLW tournaments. And here's a look at this week's tournament. All week long, we've talked about how low the water level is here on Lake Murray. We illustrate that point as we begin this week's Fuji Find Picks. When the water drops 15 feet, it makes most of the boat docks around the lakes useless, such as these. In the foreground on this next photo is J.T. Kenny, who boated just 1.5 pounds on day 1. You may think that Kenny, who's a former FLW champion, couldn't find fish. No, he just couldn't catch them. In the background is Laura Aldridge, who is JT's co-angler and fishing from the back of the boat, caught 13 pounds, 12 ounces. This is Pam Wood, who led all co-anglers heading into the finals with over 27 pounds. Together, Laura and Pam became the first females ever to make an FLW Top 10. Our next photo captures the father and son moments of life on the FLW Tour. This is Stanley Pro Scott Martin with his 2 sons, Jacob and Reed, getting ready to take the boat out of the water after day 1. Fuji Pro Wesley Strader almost took the boat out of the water as he powers up on day 3. Strader finished 10th here at Lake Murray. This week's champion was all smiles. In just his 3rd ever FLW event, Chris Elliott won it all, $100,000, and has big hugs from his wife Rhonda and mother Nancy.
For the latest on the world of pro fishing, log on to our outstanding website. You'll find it at flwoutdoors.com.
That wraps it up from Lake Murray in South Carolina. We are halfway through the 2003 regular season on the FLW Tour. Thanks for watching, everybody, this week on FLW Outdoors.
To close out the show, we're going to have a special interview with our 6th place finisher, Larry Nixon. What was your excuse? Well, that's a fine question to ask me. I did the best I could do. I'm not going to make up a bunch of excuses about how come I didn't catch fish. You know, I caught them doing one thing for 3 full days, and then all of a sudden the water falls and it gets cold, and, you know, that's 2 excuses right there. But anyway, they just didn't bite for me. I felt like Houdini to catch 3 in the last hour and a half. You know, I didn't have a fish at 12 o'clock. Take that. If you had it all to do over again, what would you do different? What would I do different? I can't go back today and do what I did yesterday. I did everything just like I felt like it should have been done yesterday. And if I had it all to do over again, I'd probably crank up and go somewhere else. But I didn't know what was going to happen, you know, so you can't do that. And I fished the way that I know how to fish, and that's all I could do. Well, you did a pretty good job. I mean, winning 6th is not winning, but you better do better than that next time or you're in trouble. You got that rope down somewhere? Cue card. Don't ask me to try to do something twice. I can say Laura and Pam, but I couldn't. Hey, when we come back, we'll have more with Laura and Pam on the water.